What's poppin', y'all? My name is Phyllis Mackenzie, and welcome to Care Life Podcast. If you love the expression of creativity in visual, performing, literary, and culinary arts, then this is the podcast for you. So subscribe and follow our social media pages through the link in the description and be part of the family. Now, let's dive into today's episode. I have done this intro for this particular episode over 5 times already because I couldn't just get rid of the background noises. There were just kids all around and I can't seem to find the right intro. But good day to you all, depending on where you're listening us from. My name is Phyllis Mackenzie and welcome to Care Life Podcast. This is a brand new episode here at Care Life, and today I read Macbeth, so you don't have to. So drop a follow button, a subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you're on YouTube, and comment down below Macbeth so I know that you're a new subscriber. This will be part 1. Part 2 will be available immediately after this one goes up, so make sure to listen to them both. If you read or like Hamlet, it's the previous episode, and any other book that I've summarized, like The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, just go a few episodes behind. It was like a year ago or 2, I don't quite remember. This podcast is 2 years old, I can't believe it. But anyways, today we are reading Macbeth. I cannot tell you how attached I got to this book, more attached than I was with Hamlet, because this story is full of twists and turns. I'm sure you won't be expecting it, but let me just get on to it so you can learn what I learned as well. So Macbeth by William Shakespeare takes place in Scotland, and this play has 5 acts. And Act 1 has 7 scenes, Act 2 has 4 scenes, Act 3 has 6 scenes, Act 4 has 3 scenes, and Act 5 has 9 scenes. So today I'll read Act 1, 2, and half of Act 3. And then in part 2 I will summarize the other half of Act 3, and then Act 4, and then finish up with Act 5. Anyways, we begin with Act 1, Scene 1. Hamlet. Act 1, Scene 1. First characters you'll encounter in this book are the 3 witches. Yes, this book has witches. And we learn that there is a battle that's taking place, and the 3 witches have agreed to meet once this battle is all over. But the problem is we don't get to know what this battle is all about, but all we know is that there's going to be like a meetup with somebody named Macbeth. With the first scene, just like most of the other 5 tragedies, it starts off with all things going wrong. And this book is not to be confused with modern sci-fi, because back then the aspects of witches and dark magic and magic in itself was very common. Anyways, we also encounter a very important line which is said by the witches in this scene, and this line is "fair is foul and foul is fair." This line is found in Act 1, Scene 1, line 11. And this particular line not only carries the theme of this entire play and other stories by Shakespeare as well, but also shapes the character arches of every individual you meet in the story. What I mean by this is that in this book, you'll realize that what's good is bad and what's bad is actually good, depending on the character themselves, depending on how the character will develop, depending on the scene itself. You realize that what seems to be good is often bad, and what is bad is often good. And we head on out to Act 1, Scene 2. And here we meet this king of Scotland. His name is King Duncan. Please highlight that. His name is King Duncan. And he plays an important part in this story, just like Macbeth. And King Duncan currently in this scene is outside Forest in, what can I call it, a military camp because of the war. And while he's here, a bloody soldier shows up from a battlefront and informs the king that rebels were going to invade the Western Isles island. And we learn from the soldier that the rebels' leader is named MacDonald. MacDonald. I know that's a weird name. Back then, Scottish people had weird names. So we are still in the dark as to where the battle is taking place exactly. But according to that bloody soldier, Macbeth and the Scottish army fought off the rebels, and MacDonald died by Macbeth's hand. And what is gruesome is how Macbeth actually killed MacDonald. And according to the soldier, Macbeth stabbed him in his belly button and then cut his body by half by slicing him open all the way to his mouth. So you can imagine, you just stab somebody into their stomach, and the sword is like obviously on the other side, and then you just force that sword up. And the actual line from the book is, he unseamed him from the nape to the chops. Chops meaning the jaws. That is Act 1, Scene 2, line 22. And of course, King Duncan is pleased by this great news, but Ross, who was the royal messenger at that time, comes to him at the same time with a new report. And he tells the king that there is an invasion in Fife. Fife is all the way in the east side of Scotland, where King Sweno, who is the king of Norway, along with Thane of Cawdor. You know, Thane at that time meant general, so the general of Cawdor, and mind you, Cawdor was in Scotland, so the general is a betrayer. So the general, along with the king of Norway, tried to invade Scotland, but brave Macbeth and the Scottish army found their way to the east and defeated the Norwegians. So from this scene, Macbeth has already won 2 battles. So without any doubt, he is a skilled warrior and is obviously devoted to the king. But that begs the question, how was he actually able to do it? You can't be at 2 places at once. And how do 2 messengers just come immediately with similar reports that, on one hand, Macbeth and the soldiers were on the west, battling those that were coming from the Western Isles Island, and he defeated them, but also he managed to ride all the way to the east and defeat King Sweno. You see, I actually don't. It's either he's just that good of a soldier, or actually he had magic, because if there were witches, then maybe he had help from unknown forces. But anyways, we dive into Act 1, Scene 3, which pushes this story onwards with telling us actually Macbeth's full name. And we learn that Macbeth's full name was Macbeth, Thane of Glamis, meaning Macbeth, the general of Glamis. And Glamis is like a whole entire area in Scotland. And he has this friend, and his name is Banquo, and Banquo was also a Thane, and they set out on a journey to meet the king at his camp. That was after both battles, but on their way there, something unexpected and what can be considered bad to others happens. And what happens during this time changes the course of events for everybody in this play, including Macbeth and Banquo. So Macbeth and his best friend Banquo meet the 3 witches, who then tell them 3 things that will happen in the future. 1, Macbeth is the Thane of Cawdor, and actually what they say is, "Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor." That is Act 1, Scene 3, line 49. And if you remember, Macbeth is actually the Thane of Glamis. And the second prophecy was, Macbeth will be king of Scotland, and what they actually said was, "All hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter." That is Act 1, Scene 3, line 50. And they follow up by saying to Banquo that his kids will become kings. In actual words, they were, "Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none." Act 1, Scene 3, line 69. And this is also confusing for both of them, as Macbeth doesn't understand what any of these 3 things mean, because how can he be the Thane of Cawdor when he's already the Thane of Glamis? And why are they saying that all hail Macbeth? And also, how will Banquo's kids become kings? Because the king already has sons, so how will his children become kings in the future? But as Macbeth is about to question the witches, they poof, disappear. And at this point, Ross, the royal messenger from earlier, arrives with a message for Macbeth. The message is that the king is proud of Macbeth for winning the two battles, and as a reward, the king is giving him a new title, Macbeth, Thane of Cawdor. So Macbeth is confused by all of this, wondering why the king would give him the title of another man. But he is informed by Ross that the king has sentenced the man to death for being a traitor who helped the king of Norway invade Scotland. And with that, the witch's first prophecy has already happened. But Macbeth is still conflicted on whether these prophecies are good or bad, because he keeps getting the urge to kill King Duncan and doesn't understand whether it's just a mere fantasy or not. And what he says in his play is, "My thought, whose murder is yet but fantastical." Act 1, Scene 3, line 139. Like immediately after the witches leave, he starts having these fantasies of killing King Duncan. But putting that aside, we push on to to Act 1, Scene 4, where Macbeth and Banquo have now arrived at the king's camp, and both are thankful for their bravery. During the two invasions, the king is like, "Oh, Macbeth and Banquo, thank you for your service," and all that. But the king announces two things, and these are two important things that are part of the story. And the first announcement he made was that his son Malcolm will be the next king. And the second announcement was King Duncan invited himself to visit Macbeth at his castle in Inverness. Even though you were a general at that time, you were given a whole entire castle, right? So obviously, because of these prophecies, Macbeth was hoping King Duncan would make him the next king. But that announcement may have just changed Macbeth altogether. And in Act 1, Scene 5, Lady Macbeth, who is Macbeth's wife, receives a letter from him which says, "I met 3 witches. They said I'll be the Thane of Cawdor. They said I will be king. The king made me the new Thane of Cawdor." That was what the letter said. Lady Macbeth is happy, obviously, with the news from her husband, and we learn that the Macbeths are a close couple that love each other a lot and are ambitious and share secrets. And according to Lady Macbeth, she says her husband is kind and would never harm anyone in order to become king faster. And by her words were too full all the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Act 1, Scene 5, lines 16 and 17. So basically, Lady Macbeth is comparing her husband's kindness to a glass of milk. He's that pure. And Lady Macbeth, on the other hand, is determined to take out anything and anyone that might be in the way of her husband being king, since he's too kind and cannot do it himself. And a servant then informs the lady that King Duncan, along with all the other royals, that is his wife, his sons, the servants, anybody else will be coming along with him, will be arriving for a visit that very night. And Lady Macbeth says a prayer, but not to God or to a god. He says a prayer to the evil spirits, asking that she can be part of King Duncan's murder without having to regret anything. And when Macbeth gets home, she obviously, because they don't keep secrets from each other, she tells him what her plan is, and this has Macbeth very worried. So the lady tells him to wear a poker face so no one can tell what he's thinking. It could be the worst thing, but if you could just reveal your plans with your face, that would ruin everything for not only Macbeth but for the lady as well. And her words were, look thee like an innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Act 1, Scene 5, line 64 and 65. And this brings us to Act 1, Scene 6, where King Duncan and all his other royals arrive at Macbeth's castle, and they're greeted by Lady Macbeth, who is all nice and sweet and pretending to be the perfect hostess, and nothing basically happens in this scene. But in Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth leaves the dining table and is now seated in a different room alone in his castle, obviously. He doesn't want to kill the king because of two reasons. One, he is the king's relative and subject, and secondly, he is the king's host and thus should protect him. And the words were actually, first, I am his kinsman and subject. That is Act 1, Scene 7, line 14. Line 13, pardon me. And then in line 14 and 16, he says, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. So he's contemplating. He shouldn't, but he actually is contemplating. But due to pure ambition of wanting to be king, he really wants to kill King Duncan. So he sits there talking to himself and contemplating, obviously, on what would be a valid reason to kill the king, but there are none. And this brings us to the greatest quote, one of the greatest quotes in the whole book. And it's in Act 1, Scene 7, line 25 and 26. I have no spar to prick the sides of my intent. What he basically means here is that he is comparing his thoughts with a horseshoe and a horse itself. You know, when you want a horse to run faster or gallop faster, your boot you'll actually attach a spur, which is like that little star that you see in boots, and when you prick the side of the horse, obviously it will run faster. But according to Macbeth, he says that in his mind he has no spur to prick the sides of his intent. And in line 25 through 28, he says, vaulting ambition which overleaps itself and falls on the other side. This is where his ambition comes in. And he's comparing his ambition with mounting a horse, where he's thinking that because of his vaulting ambition, his leaping ambition, that if he were to rely on pure need, that maybe, just maybe, his needs might leap further than he expected and land on the other side of the horse instead of on it. And this is a very stressful situation, obviously, for Macbeth, because he doesn't want to kill the king, but on the other hand, if he does kill the king, then he will become the next king, and obviously fulfilling the prophecies of the three witches. So Lady Macbeth finds him still in his confused state, thinking, but he says that they will not be killing the king. He's made up his mind at this point that they won't be killing the king. And his words were, we will proceed no further in this business. That is Act 1, Scene 7, line 31. And Lady Macbeth is obviously not happy with this decision and tells him that if he himself does not kill the king, then he's not a man. And she says if she is committed to do something, or if she had decided to do something herself, then she does it. And Lady Macbeth explains, or rather backs up her statement with a very peculiar example by saying that if she had agreed to kill a child who was quietly nursing by her chest, and she killed the child by bashing its brains out, then she would actually do it. And you can read this in Act 1, Scene 7, line 54 all the way to 58. And surprisingly, this very statement of killing the little child who was nursing at her chest makes Macbeth agree to the murder of the good king. So Lady Macbeth tells him her plan, that she would go get Duncan's servants drunk and make it look like they did the act, which is in Act 1, Scene 7, line 63 and all the way to 72. And Macbeth agrees to this. And they head back, obviously, where he puts on this facade and pretends all is okay so he can entertain his friends and the king and his family. And that is basically the end of Act 1. And in summary, Act 1, you meet Macbeth, you meet King Duncan, you meet Macbeth's friend Banquo, and you meet this minor character Ross. You know that Macbeth and Banquo are great friends and great warriors, that King Duncan is a good king, and you meet the three witches who have prophesied something that now changes the course of events for everything, because this evil wife, Lady Macbeth, controls the husband. She makes decisions for the husband, because even though you're a nice couple, if why would your wife tell you to kill somebody and you agree to it? And by the end of Act 1, they have already made a plan on how they will kill the king. Mind you, this is not just any king. King Duncan was a relative to Macbeth. It's basically like killing your uncle or your grandpa or something like that. But anyways, let us gallop all the way to Act 2. In Act 2, Scene 1, and in this new act, we meet Banquo and his son, Fleance. And they are in his castle talking, and Fleance tells his father there's no moon in the sky, which Banquo adds that there are no stars in the sky. The setting of this particular scene is a dark and cold night, and Macbeth then joins them, where Banquo tells him that he dreams of the three witches, but Macbeth says that he doesn't even think of them. But this statement is a complete lie, because Macbeth has been thinking of the witches non-stop. And you'll notice this in Act 2, Scene 1, line 22, where he says, "I think not of them." But he does. When Banquo and his son leave to go and sleep for the night, Macbeth sets out and thinks of killing the king in his sleep. But out of nowhere, a bloody dagger appears before him. So you can imagine, you're just in your castle, everybody is asleep, and now you want to kill the king, but this bloody dagger appears out of nowhere before you. And Macbeth isn't sure if this is real or just a fragment of his imagination, because he says, "Is this a dagger I see before me? The handle towards my hand?" Act 2, Scene 1, lines 33. And this, let me call it a ghost dagger, leads him to the king's room, where Macbeth walks past the drunk servants and he murders King Duncan. And that's basically all in Act 2, Scene 1. But in Act 2, Scene 2, Lady Macbeth is waiting for her husband, and she would have killed the king herself, but obviously she couldn't. And you might think that because she was just too weak to do it, but her reason not to was because King Duncan looked much like her father. So she thought that murdering the king would be like murdering her own dad. So when Macbeth arrives, he's all bloody and upset, which he then hears a voice in the wind that says, "Sleep no more." Macbeth does murder sleep. That's Act 2, Scene 2, lines 35 to 36. And seeing that Macbeth has brought along with him the bloody murder weapons, yes, I said weapons, because he actually had a dagger and then the ghost dagger as well. So she tells him to return both of them to the room of the dead king, but he refuses, which he says that, "I am afraid to think what I have done." Act 2, Scene 2, line 51. And Lady Macbeth grabs both daggers and goes forth to return them. But as she has gone and now she's coming back to her husband, someone then knocks on the castle doors. But Lady Macbeth is now also covered in blood. Her hands are bloody and her husband is bloody now. So she tells him that water will get rid of all the blood and that they'll be cleaned up. So she thinks that by washing, this will clear them of all their problems. And you'll see this in Act 2, Scene 2, line 66, where she says, "A little water clears us of this deed." And also in Act 2, Scene 2, line 74, she says that, "To know my deed, 'twere best not to know myself." This was Hamlet. Hamlet was now feeling guilty. He couldn't bear it. And he's already feeling sorry for killing King Duncan. But what more can he do? Like, he's already dead. You can't just bring the dead back. And in Act 2, Scene 3, Macbeth's porter, who we can call like a butler, opens the door to the castle, and in comes Macduff. And Macduff, not to be confused by Macbeth, these are two different people. Macduff is actually the hero in this play, and Macduff has arrived with this minor character. His name is Lennox, and Macduff has come to accompany the king, who is now dead, on the journey back to his own castle. So Macbeth takes Macduff to the king's room where they discover the murder. Obviously, Macbeth knew because he is the one who did the deed, but this is a shock to Macduff. And in terror, he wakes up everybody, including the late king's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain. Donalbain was the younger, Malcolm was the older. And everyone is in a state of confusion. And when they're all distracted, Macbeth decides to kill the drunken servants as well. And when the royal sons are informed of their father's death, they decide to run away and leave immediately, not even looking back, since they don't know who the killer is, and they were fearing basically that they might be the next target. So in Act 2, Scene 3, people are just confused. The king is dead, the sons have now run away, they don't know who the murderer is. And in Act 2, Scene 4, here we meet minor characters like Ross and the old man, who are discussing the king's death. And meanwhile, as they're doing this and everybody in town is just discussing the king's death, nature itself has gone into chaos after the king's death. And Ross quotes, "By thy clock, 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the traveling lamp." Act 2, Scene 4, line 6 to 7. What he basically meant was that it was already during the day, but the sky was dark. The sky shows it's nighttime, but it's already the middle of the day. And there was also a rumor that was going about that King Duncan's horses had gone wild and had turned into cannibals. And these are seen in lines 16 and 18, where they say that turned wild in nature, they ate each other. Basically, the horses had gone wild and now they're eating each other instead of eating grass. And Macduff arrives and gives Ross and the old man the latest news, but people think that Malcolm and Donalbain hired the two dead servants to kill their father, and Macbeth will now be crowned king, because obviously the sons have run away. What else would the people think? And this brings us to a close in the gruesome Act 2, where the king is now dead because of Macbeth and his wife. There are no witnesses because the servants were now drunk and dead also, and the one who discovered the death was the hero of this story, who is Macduff. We have met the sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, who have now run away because their dad's dead, and Macbeth will get what was prophesied. He'll become king. But sliding on to Act 3. Act 3 is where the backbone of the story is, because we begin with Act 3, Scene 1, and in this new act, Macbeth has now been crowned king, but things have changed between him and Banquo. If you remember, when this play began, Banquo and Macbeth were best of friends, and though they were once those great friends who fought together in battle, and they loved spending time together, their families spent time together, right now, in this act, they have turned suspicious of each other. And Banquo is suspicious of Macbeth because all the witches said have come true for him. But the fact that he became king this fast makes Banquo think that Macbeth did something wrong. And he says this in Act 1, Scene 1, in Act 3, Scene 1, lines 2 and 3, where he says, "I fear thou played most foully for it." And Banquo still hopes that what the witches said for him will become true. So when the Macbeths walk in to remind him of the feast that was happening that evening, because right now the Macbeths have obviously moved to the main castle and Banquo was visiting. Banquo puts on a smile and tells them that him and his son Fleance will be going out for horseback riding in that afternoon, and then they'll join them in the evening. And at this point, Macbeth is worried that Banquo knows what he has done. Mind you, Banquo is only suspicious but doesn't know what Macbeth did. But according to Macbeth, he's now getting, what can I say, schizophrenic? That word was not there before, but I think Macbeth was developing schizophrenia at this point. And what he says is, our fears in Banquo stick deep. That is Act 3, Scene 1, line 47 and 48. And Macbeth is angry. He's angry because he thinks the witches tricked him into doing the dirty work. So he goes on, kills King Duncan, but Banquo's children will become king in the future. And this is in Act 3, Scene 1, line 64, where he says, for Banquo's issue, I have defiled my mind. You know, I cannot think of anything else, because I too think that the witches tricked him, because how do you tell me that a phantom blade appears and helps him commit the murder? And then in the end, if it was a phantom blade, obviously that blade was not supposed to be there. But Macbeth walks out of the king's room with two blades, the blade he used and the bloody phantom blade. Yeah, I also think I'm on Macbeth's side here. The witches tricked him. And that very day, Macbeth meets up with two assassins or murderers, I don't know what we can call it, and they plan on how they will kill Banquo and Fleance at the same time. And by doing this, Macbeth can avoid the third prophecy from coming true. And this is all in Act 1. Oh, in Act 3, Scene 1. And in Act 3, Scene 2, pardon me, these acts will get you confused, but Lady Macbeth in this act is wondering what is eating up the mind of her husband, but tells him to leave all the thoughts behind them by saying, what's done is done. Act 3, Scene 2, lines 12. But Macbeth isn't enjoying being king as much as he thought he would, because the thought of what he did to the other king, King Duncan, still haunts him, and he is now suspicious of everybody around him. And he says this in Act 3, Scene 2, line 36, where he says, oh, full of scorpions, my mind, dear wife. And you might be wondering what these scorpions are. He has killed King Duncan. He has not confessed to killing King Duncan. He has taken the throne, and now he's planning to kill his best friend and the best friend's son. Those are the scorpions that are eating up his mind. But he doesn't tell the wife exactly what all these are. And unlike before, Macbeth is now starting to act all on his own, not wanting to involve his wife in any of his deeds, good or bad. So any plans he might have from this scene going forward, including those of killing Banquo and Fleance, he doesn't tell her. She's completely in the dark. So the only thing that she knows is that her husband killed the other king, but whatever deed he might do after, she doesn't know. And this brings us to Act 3, Scene 3. And here, Banquo and Fleance are in the afternoon, enjoying the afternoon with their horses, just riding the countryside, when they are attacked by three assassins, murderers, I don't know what we can call it also. But Banquo is fast and knows what is happening because he's a soldier and all that. So he yells to his son to run, and run fast. And his words were, fly, good Fleance, fly, fly, fly. Act 3, Scene 3, line 17. And sadly, Banquo is murdered, but Fleance manages to escape. And although he escapes, we don't get to know where he is, because he's never mentioned ever again in this play. Father is dead, Fleance runs away. That's the end of their story for both of them. Fleance will never get to live another day in this play. And After all that, I don't want to continue into scene 4 of Act 3. I think that I'll do in part 2 going forth. But basically, from Act 1 all the way to the half of Act 3, we have met very powerful characters. That was King Duncan. We have met Macbeth, who was once, then twice, and now king. We have met the king's sons, Malcolm and Donald Bain. We have met Macbeth's ex-late best friend. I don't know what you can call it. He was the best friend, now ex-best friend, now dead best friend, Banquo. We have met his son, who has now ended his era after he ran away during the time they were attacked. And we have met Lady Macbeth, who is totally evil, but not as evil as the husband. They have already had 2 deaths so far, that is of Banquo and of King Duncan, both killed by the same man, that is Macbeth. And going forward, I can promise you it gets more gruesome than it already has, but this will be part 1 of Macbeth. Please join me for part 2, which I will upload after this one. And if you have any questions, follow us on social media, drop in the comments. That is at Podcast by Kenzie. Links will be in the description. Do not forget to please check out our second podcast, Phyllis Mackenzie's Weekend for Campfire podcast. We have discovered so much. That is why I've been behind in uploading here and there as well. I was doing research on haunted places, but I think I'll speak more of that in the other show. But don't forget to follow us, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to comment, don't forget to rate. We all love you here at Care Live, and good day or good night depending on where you're listening us from. XOXO, bye. And that will be it for this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. Rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcasting app, especially Apple Podcasts, and share it with all your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, creativity is intelligence having fun. Until next time, #PodRock.